Hi, welcome to Achieving the Dreams SwiftStudent, a new tool to help students navigate financial aid webinar. Thank you for joining us today. If you could please take a couple of minutes to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, including your name, institution, and role. We will get started here shortly.
One point of clarification: when you're entering your name, please select all panelists and attendees so everybody can see all of you here, not just the panelists. And you'll see that in the drop-down menu right next to the 2: at the bottom of the chat box.
Again, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. We're going to get started in a few moments. Please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, including your name, institution, and role.
Just as one clarification, when you're entering into the chat, be sure to select the down menu next to the 2 to make sure that it says all panelists and attendees so we can all see who's here.
All right, welcome to Achieving the Dreams webinar, SwiftStudent, a new tool to help students navigate financial aid. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will begin by just giving a few short tech reminders. Please make sure that you know that your audio and video will be turned off. You're welcome to answer any of your questions and answers, and we will add those into the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking questions throughout the presentation, and at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A section. We'll try to answer all of your questions in the chat if we have the answer immediately, but we'll also give you an opportunity to ask them at the end as well. If you have any issues with your audio, there is an audio settings button at the bottom of your screen as well. Please note that this webinar will be recorded. All attendees will receive a follow-up email with the recording and the slide deck. We welcome you to share your ideas or your insights on our Twitter page using the hashtag #ATD_network. We encourage you to also follow SwiftStudents on social media at SwiftStudents, plural, and also SHS Funds on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Now I will turn it over to Dr. Monica Parrish-Trent, the Vice President of Engagement and Network Engagement at Achieving the Dream.
Welcome, everyone. As Amber mentioned, I'm Monica Parrish-Trent, and I'm the Vice President of Network Engagement at Achieving the Dream. I want to thank you for taking time to join us today to learn about an exciting free digital financial aid tool, SwiftStudent, developed by the Selden Haring Smith Foundation in collaboration with students, college counselors, and higher education partners. With me are Abigail Selden, Chief Executive Officer of the Selden Haring Smith Foundation, who will demo the SwiftStudent tool and answer questions, and Amber Reed, our Associate Director of College Relations at Achieving the Dream. Achieving the Dream leads America's largest network of community colleges working to better support students in their educational journeys. Conceived as an initiative in 2004 by the Lumina Foundation and 7 founding partner organizations, Achieving the Dream now leads the most comprehensive non-governmental reform movement for student success in higher education history. Together with our network of over 277 institutions of higher education, 75 coaches and advisors, and numerous investors and partners working throughout 44 states and the District of Columbia, we are helping more than 4 million community college students have a better chance of realizing greater economic opportunity and achieving their dreams. Core to Achieving the Dream's mission is championing evidence-based institutional improvement and eliminating equity gaps. Achieving the Dream is proud to partner with the Selden Haring Smith Foundation in helping students effectively navigate the federal student aid process. As we know, the overwhelming majority of community college students are dependent on their financial aid packages to not only attend school, but to offset the cost of their living expenses. During the 2017 school year, 75% of first-time, full-time public community college students received financial aid. We also know that for many of those students, their financial aid package was insufficient. There was not enough aid to cover their tuition and expenses, including their basic needs. During the 2018-19 year, Pell Grants were the most important form of financial aid for community college students, helping more than 2.4 million of them access and succeed in higher education each year. The SwiftStudent tool enables students to learn about the financial aid appeal process, review eligibility requirements for making an appeal, and customize a financial aid appeal to start the conversation with their college financial aid office, all online. The economic upheaval caused by the COVID-19 outbreak has had a significant impact on students during this time, including the loss of personal or family income and the process and timeline for colleges to award financial aid packages. Due to COVID-19, new emergency financial aid funding as part of the CARES Act may be available to students who inquire about aid through their schools. These emergency aid funds will be distributed to students whose inquiries or requests are approved by their institutions. Abigail Selden is the CEO of the Selden Haring Smith Foundation, which she co-founded with her husband, Whitney Haring Smith, in 2019. A Rhodes Scholar and Forbes 30 Under 30, Selden previously co-founded College Abacus, an edtech company known as the Kayak.com of financial aid, in 2012. Selden served as the company's CEO until she led the successful sale in 2014 to ECMC Group. She joined the acquirer as VP of Innovation and Product Development, where she started and led their DC-based innovation lab, an 80% female technology and design center. Selden has been profiled in national media outlets, including the New York Times, and her work on the Abacus products was highlighted in Secretary John King's 2016 speech, Opportunity Across America. Selden now serves on the boards of Temple University's Hope Center, Montgomery College Foundation, and the Association of American Rhodes Scholars. Welcome, Abigail.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. So it's a pleasure to join all of you today to share SwiftStudent. We've had a whirlwind 2 weeks now since we launched this tool. I know many of you have heard about it through the ATD network or more broadly through the really positive media coverage we've been fortunate to receive. We were very fortunate to work closely with 5 ATD schools in the process of developing this, as well as achieving the dream, Indian River Community College, Northwest Florida, Montgomery County, and then even more closely with Montgomery College and Everett Community College. Dr. Darien Pollard is the president of Montgomery College. I know, well known to many of you, called it an equity leveler in the Washington Post. And we're particularly excited to be bringing it out for free to everybody at this difficult time with COVID-19. So I'm thrilled to walk you through it today. And as I mentioned, and we'll go over this again, but this is a completely free tool that you can start using immediately without any kind of relationship with us. So SwiftStudent really aims to answer the question for students, how can I request a change to my college financial aid package? And so SwiftStudent will help you write a financial aid appeal letter for free. So we go through, am I eligible? What documents do I need? How do I write an appeal letter? And how do I submit my letter to the financial aid office? We spotlight 6 common inquiries here. How do I ask the financial aid office to exclude parental information when they calculate my financial aid? How do I ask for more financial aid if my financial situation changes after I fill out the Fafsa? We expect that almost every student who's filed the Fafsa in the last 12 months will need to fill out this kind of appeal. How do I ask for financial aid to cover a computer or childcare costs, expenses associated with my disability, or a financial emergency related to COVID-19? So SwiftStudent is really intended to be a free resource to enhance your existing appeals process. We did not intend this tool to displace or replace the existing forms. Rather, we thought of this as a way to help students start the appeals conversation with financial aid officers, and a way to remedy the real lack of general information about appeals online currently. While some schools are able to maintain clear information on their school websites, we know that's a challenge for many schools, and studentaid.gov actually doesn't include any information about appeals currently. It's not even listed in their glossary. So we really wanted to help fill that gap for students. As I mentioned earlier, SwiftStudent is free to students and to financial aid officers. There is no sign-up process. So you can start using this immediately if you'd like, without any kind of relationship with us. Of course, we'd like to hear from you, especially on social media, at SwiftStudents across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But you don't need to share with us that you're using it or have an agreement or anything formal. We were very fortunate to build SwiftStudent with a number of leading partners across the higher ed landscape, in addition to Achieving the Dream and Montgomery College and Everett Community College, Indian River, Northwest Florida, and Montgomery County Community College. NASFA in particular and the National College Attainment Network, NCAN, were deeply involved, as was the Hope Center. All of these listed partners helped us write the actual text on the website, but NASFA, NCAN, and Hope, and ATD each had at least one staff member, and actually NASFA had 5, editing our Google documents in real time across 4 drafts. And we really accepted all of the changes as our only goal here is to be a translator. And beyond that we don't have any agenda. We just want to get this right. So students who want to start my appeal will go to this page where they can learn about eligibility, find a free template. We're going to update this obviously to download an email to your financial aid office and wait for the school to accept or reject their request. We also have some more basic information about what's an appeal, understanding that information is not widely known. And you may have seen some of these infographics circulating on social media already. We really wanted to make it clear to students that they can submit a financial aid appeal at any time throughout their college journey. There's guidance throughout the site that there are sometimes better than others, and you should do it as soon as you know that you need to file an appeal, but generally wanted to encourage students to reach out if they need help. So we've built in a number of scenarios, and some of these are multiple doors for the same room. So for example, ask for more financial aid if my financial situation has changed, or if the FAFSA doesn't capture a financial difficulty I'm currently facing. Both of those will go to our special circumstance or professional judgment page. Similarly, ask for help with a car repair or for an emergency related to COVID-19 will both go to the emergency aid page. But of course, students don't always think about these kinds of appeals in the same fixed categories that they're in regulation or in school policy. So we wanted to make it clear to them that there were situations that could match the ones that they're experiencing. Conversely, there are some things that we separated because of feedback from students. We ran more than 20 focus groups throughout the process of developing SwiftStudent. About 10 of those groups were with financial aid officers and 10 were with college students. And when we did one group with student parents, what we found is that bundling dependent care and child care into the same kind of appeal, even though that's the way it's written in regulation, was very confusing to them. And so we split them into 2 pages. You know, in the same vein, students found that having 2 kinds of SAP appeals was confusing. So we put them in 1 page, but the logic will put you in the correct kind of letter, depending on the information you answer. Also, something else interesting that came out of a focus group was a request from students that we build a letter for them to share when they ask for letters of support around a dependency override. We had a number of students who had gone through that process and found it very difficult, not only to ask for help from somebody to write them a letter of support, but those people never understood what to put in the letter. And so we said, okay, you know, we can go look at that. And then when we broached that with a focus group of financial aid officers, they said, oh, that would be so great. There's actually really specific information we need to be in a letter of support for a dependency override. And so we built the letter with the financial aid group. So, you know, I think that's a nice story and to some extent a representative story of what we found in the focus groups, which is that, you know, students and financial aid officers broadly wanted to solve the same problems. So I'll walk you now through how do I ask for more financial aid if the FAFSA does not capture a financial difficulty I am currently facing. So you may be able to get additional loans or a grant if your financial situation changes after you submit the FAFSA, or if the FAFSA does not capture a financial difficulty you are currently facing. While there is no guarantee that the school will adjust your financial aid package, federal law allows financial aid officers to use professional judgment to update the information used to calculate a student's financial aid offer. And then we of course have some language about CARES and, you know, broader descriptions of the circumstance. Throughout all of our guidance, we have repeated notices to students that if their school has a form or process, they should use that first. You know, for us as a foundation, we don't consider it a success if students use our forms. We consider it a success if students understand how the appeals process works and are able to advocate for themselves. Whether they click create my document or not is immaterial. We'd much rather, in fact, that they use a school's forms if they can find them. We think of our forms as sort of a last resort. So we have extended guidance here about the circumstances and the process for this, but we know that many students won't read it. They'll just click create my document. So we've replicated a lot of that guidance throughout this next step that I'm going to share with you. So, and this is the part where you can see that the benefits of our relationship with FormSwift, which is providing and maintaining this platform for free. So they've been operating their company for a long time, so their technology is pretty cool. See, I entered the date and it just dynamically updates in real time. And this whole system works actually very well on mobile, which we know will be important for many students with limited internet access. You can see the impact of our partners in these kinds of questions. You know, what is the name used for official school records, such as your FAFSA? Something we heard from many of our financial aid partners was that students will submit appeals and then they won't be able to process them because they won't be able to match the name in the signature with any of their files because the student will sign with a nickname and won't include any contact information that they can use. And so we found those to be particularly heartbreaking and really wanted to make sure that we didn't perpetuate that kind of problem. Similarly, please include your school email address. We heard from many schools that they can't send financial aid information to a personal email address. Though, of course, we have guidance here that if they haven't started at the school yet, they can use a personal email address. And again, we try to calibrate expectations. Remember, the financial aid office may take a few weeks to respond to your letter. Keep in mind whether you expect to have a working phone or reliable access to your email, because you can pick how you'd like to be contacted. And again, that just keeps updating on the right-hand side of the screen. So what aspects of your financial situation are not fully captured in your Fafsa? We have extended guidance here, but we expect that, of course, many of us will be seeing special circumstances like these. My parents both lost their jobs due to COVID-19. We are now living on unemployment. We are living with relatives while we wait for a Section 8 voucher. And again, that summary of the student situation populates just at the end of the first paragraph. And we prompt students to think about what documents they can include with their letter. So my parents' unemployment paperwork. And then the student ID number. We, of course, heard from financial aid offices that this was very important. But of course, there's not always a culture of students memorizing their student ID number. I know that I never learned mine in college. So we include a notice for students to figure out where to find that. And then that's it. So we prompt students to download a copy of the letter and email it to their financial aid office from their school email account. They can download the letter as a PDF or as a Word document, or they can email it to themselves to access later. But there's obviously no way to set up an account. The letter will download. As you can see, there's a header with the student ID and my name, as well as all the information we went through together. And here we sort of, I would say, wave at the idea of bundling. The student asks for, all, in addition to other deadlines, forms, next steps, and requirements, other resources or scholarships available, and who to contact to pursue those options. At the footer, we have a notice about where the student created the letter, understanding that there are so many scams out there. We really wanted financial aid officers who started to receive these letters to know where it came from and know where to go for more information, and then to hopefully see ATV's logo and NASFA's logo and understand that this was really a legitimate effort by the field. In addition to the letter, this checklist downloads for students. This was something that came out of a student focus group. They really wanted to have a set of reminders about what they were supposed to do next. So we built the checklist with reminders to hold on to copies of the letter, keep track of conversations with financial aid office, check their school email address every day because the process may still require more information. And then we also have a worksheet to help them record their interactions with the financial aid office. And one other point about sort of this underlying system, it is extremely private. So we at the foundation and FormSwift actually can't access any of the underlying information that goes into these letters. The only information we have about usage comes from Google Analytics and from this optional survey that we have at the end. And the survey feedback has been really tremendous so far, with really, heartwarming and heart-wrenching comments from students saying things like, this really helped, simplify the process for me. Thank you so much. Or this helps me, especially since I'm the first in my family to go to college. We've been really warmed, and our team has been really excited to see those kinds of comments come through in the survey. But again, that's the only kind of feedback we get. We can't analyze or see any of this underlying private data. So that's really the end of the demo part of this presentation. I'm thrilled to be able to pass it back to Amber and to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Abigail, for sharing the demo. We just want to ask everyone to please put any questions that you have about the demo or SwiftStudent in the Q&A box below. Before we begin our question and answer portion, I would like to share a personal experience that I've had with financial aid. As I hear about the current impact of students and families around the world due to COVID-19 and the financial impact of the global economy, I can't help but be reminded of my personal experience for the financial aid appeals process during the Great Recession in 2007 and 2008. At that time, I was a first-generation college student going into my junior year. I was very involved on campus. I was managing a heavy workload in the business school, working full-time as a resident assistant and part-time at the library. In addition to that, I was also dealing with many family and financial challenges. My GPA dropped below a B average, which resulted in me losing my tuition scholarship and my job as a resident assistant, which paid for my campus housing and meal plan. My mother, a veteran teacher raising my young twin sisters at home, and my father, a truck driver, were not able to help pay the gap in my tuition and housing. Due to the recession, there were not many private loan options available to me or my parents due to their lower income and credit scores. I felt crushed when my mother told me that it was time for me to come home until we could figure out how to pay for my education. Luckily, I confided in a campus mentor. He asked me if I had appealed my financial aid package. I didn't know what he was talking about, let alone that I had the option to appeal anything. After a lot of research and talks with the financial aid office, I was able to write an appeal that was approved and provided me with enough money to find suitable housing as well as additional work hours at the school library. I know from my own experience as a first-generation college student that financial aid can be a breaking point in achieving your dreams. If I had not confided in someone, I wouldn't have known about the process and I probably wouldn't have finished my degree at that time. Because of my experience, I see the high value and importance of SwiftStudent, especially as we are in a new economic and health crisis. SwiftStudent provides the just-in-time supports that students need facing challenges like mine. I hope that you all will see how important SwiftStudent is, an extremely important tool for financial aid offices around the country to share with their students and campuses alike. Now we are going to go into our question and answer session. I'm going to pass it back to Monica and Trent.
Thank you, Amber, for sharing your story. Abigail, the first question that we have is, can you please tell us about the initial feedback you've gotten from students and financial aid officers about the SwiftStudent tool?
So we've been incredibly moved by the feedback. I think that we had the benefit of being at the right time, given the COVID-19 crisis. So the feedback from students has been, in some ways very emotional. Students have gone through, I would say, typically a series of emotions when they find the tool, shock that this process exists at all, anger that they didn't know about it before, sadness when they think about how they could have used it previously or how members of their family or their peers could have used it previously, since this is such a stressful issue for so many students, both financial aid and the economic issues that make financial aid so critical. And then after that, they typically pivot to really focused evangelism. So we have found that the early adopters have really been helping us spread the tool. And I would say we see a slightly less emotional but similar level of engagement from the financial aid officers that we've shared this with. Many, I think like most people on this call, already contend with a tremendous workload and with students who have very real and very urgent needs. And so, we have quotes from our focus groups with things like, I would cherish every email I got like this. And, this is going to make processing these appeals much faster for us, or this is going to save us so much work. I think for me, some of the more heartrending comments have been, people being grateful that they're not going to lose the appeals thanks to things like not knowing how to find the student again with contact information being missing.
Thank you, Abigail. Here's a follow-up question to that. Since we know that our students really need a tool as valuable as SwiftStudent, how do we get the word out to them in this new, fully remote environment? What are your suggestions for how we get students to know more about the SwiftStudent tool and what it can do for them?
Well, I'm so grateful first and thank the person who asked the question for wanting to help us share this out. We have seen our partners successfully do a number of things so far. One is posting this as a resource on the financial aid page of the website, of your school website. And we can provide through ATD, or you can see how ATD has done it on their website. We have some sample text and images that you can use if that's helpful. We've also been seeing our partners do webinars for their students and their financial aid offices or student support staff to spread the word so that way folks are familiar with this tool. I know that ed tech has not always delivered in higher ed, and so we found that demos have really helped folks who may be a little bit more nervous about a new tool. And then we've seen more conventional things work, like social media, pushing it out through school social media accounts, and then just through actually direct email or text to students. We have a number of large-scale partners that are starting to roll those processes out. And so, in this new age, I think we're all trying to figure out how to communicate effectively with one another. But those are some of the strategies that we're seeing be successful so far.
Thank you, Abigail. How long is the appeal process? And is there access to live chat when completing the SwiftStudent letter, especially for students who might have a little bit of trouble navigating the technology?
Great question. So the appeal, I'll take it in two parts. So the appeals process length really varies by school. So SwiftStudent is only able to help the students start the conversation with the financial aid offices, but what happens from there depends really by the school about how fast they can process and what other information they need. So we know some schools are doing, emergency aid within 24 or 48 hours, and others, take longer, similarly for other kinds of appeals like professional judgment. In terms of live chat, we don't have that capability, but what I can tell you is that we have found that testing this with students, including students who seem less comfortable technically, I would say those students were well represented in our focus groups, and we've seen that they've been able to manage it pretty effectively.
Thank you. Do you have any information on the percentage of students who have filed a successful appeal?
No, actually, that information is not tracked by the Department of Education or published.
Thank you. My next question is the SwiftStudent tool available to all students who are at other types of institutions beyond community colleges? Absolutely.
This tool should work for any student receiving federal student aid attending any Title IV eligible institution. So, and similarly, who is a prospective student at an institution. So college seniors, for example, now who are working out their financial aid officers could also use this tool. And graduate students as well. Really, if you're in a Title IV eligible program and you're receiving federal student aid, this can work for you.
My next question is, who might be the best person on campus to introduce the SwiftStudent tool so that it is widely shared?
So we're seeing folks take a variety of approaches. I would say that, for us, our outreach has been focused on financial aid offices, student advisors and student support staff, and actually student groups. But I think that anybody who's having direct interaction with students is a good person or good type of person to ensure knows about the tool.
Thank you. And there's a question here, if you could talk a little bit about how SwiftStudent has been launched publicly and some of the things that have happened to get the word out to students so that those students could then perhaps ask in the financial aid offices if the SwiftStudent tool is available.
Absolutely. So we've been very fortunate to get really tremendous and positive press coverage so far. So we've had a feature in the Washington Post and in EdSurge and in the Chronicle of Higher Education, as well as being part of stories in Bloomberg, Inside Higher Ed, and the New York Times actually this past Saturday. We were part of a large feature article. So we're seeing it spread that way. We're also seeing tremendous spread through social media, thanks to partners like ATD who are helping us get the word out. All of our 18 higher ed partners are doing that kind of work with us on social media, as well as in their communities. We're also seeing college counseling offices, college access groups, and schools, as well as actually higher education commissions in states, putting it on their websites and pushing it out independently of us. You know, the Minnesota Board of Higher Education has started distributing it. And we're getting incoming inquiries from groups like that who just want to know a little bit more about us before they start to distribute. Washington State, I believe, is going to start to highlight this out publicly in the next couple weeks. In terms of, you know, students finding it, you know, we are starting to get traffic. It's hard to differentiate so far which of our traffic is students versus others. But you know, generally we are finding students, you know, having a very positive impact to it where they leave us feedback or where they share it with us back on social.
Thank you, Abigail. So we're getting some questions about the financial aid officers that help support the development of the SwiftStudent. So can you talk a little bit more about the partnership with the financial aid offices and financial aid officers in designing the SwiftStudent tool? Absolutely.
And in fact, this line, how can I request a change to my college financial aid package, was written by NASFA, the National Association of Financial Aid Administrators, in a focus group we had with their staff. My 5th draft version was not good enough, and they said, how about this? And you can see we decided to take their recommendation. So the way this website was developed was, you know, in tandem focus groups and collaborative writing. So we put the first draft of basically every word on this website into a shared Google Doc that all of our partners had access to. And so 5 staff members from the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, as well as representatives from Achieving the Dream and elsewhere, current and former financial aid officers, all had access to that document and the 3 following drafts. And everyone did track changes. So it really was a deep collaborative writing process. And you know, as I said, we don't have an agenda here beyond getting it right and making it clear to students. So we accepted basically every edit that we received. And we did that 3 more times before it was done, and folks didn't really have any additional edits. Similarly, we held more than 10 focus groups with financial aid officers and college staff. Those financial aid officers, many came from community college and regional state institutions. We did have some folks from selective schools as well. And in those groups, we not only went over text, but looked at features and other kinds of content strategies. And you know, their feedback, you know, deeply shaped the tool, including things like, you know, making sure that we had, how do I submit my letter to the financial aid office, making it clear that we weren't going to do that automatically.
Thank you, Abigail. Where can attendees go to review the tool more thoroughly in preparation for helping their students use it? This is a 2-part question. And the second part is, are you still accepting additional feedback from new users? Is there a way that they can provide additional information to you?
Absolutely. So the site is live. You know, as I mentioned, you know, it's been public now for almost 2 weeks. We have traffic from all 50 states. We actually had that within the first 3 days of launch. So you can access it. I've pulled it up here, you know, formswift.com/SwiftStudent. And I know that ATD can also share that link in the chat. But it is live now, so you're welcome to go and use it. In terms of feedback, you know, yes, we are always interested in feedback. As I said, we can't customize it, and we don't customize it for an individual school's need. but we are seeking to expand it. So we are working on, for example, a letter specifically for former foster youth who have some special situations, and unaccompanied homeless youth, to actually build out a separate letter for them beyond what we have currently. And so those letters and others will go online this summer, and the tool will be continuously maintained with new letters rolling out, certainly by this fall, but on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that 5 Achieving the Dream colleges participated in the design of the SwiftStudent tool by giving you some valuable input. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned, either from the students or from the college administrators, while you were test piloting the tool before your public launch?
Absolutely. So I think for us, one of the things that we had thought about but hadn't really operationalized yet was this question of distribution. How do we make it, and you can see on the screen, how do we make it easy for the schools to share this kind of information? And so building out, a poster and a flyer and slides for financial aid nights was something that ATD member schools are really keen for us to have. And, certainly the things that we were happy to provide. We know how busy school staff are. And so however we can make this easy, we'd like to make it easy. Other things that really were important was this question of, does SwiftStudent share or sell information? We don't. And making that explicit upfront and on the homepage was something that was really important to ATD members and to students, actually, in the student focus groups. So we were excited to include that. Our FAQs as well are deeply informed by our conversations with the ATD schools specifically. So questions, for, again, specific populations of students. I'm homeless, which letter do I use? My parents are incarcerated, which letter do I use? I can't submit any of these letters due to my family's immigration status, what do I do? These kinds of specific circumstances, came out in part of conversations with some of our ATD partners, as well as some of the letters. So we had originally not intended to have an extension letter for students missing a financial aid deadline. And that came out of a conversation with Montgomery College. It's a common issue that they've run into, and asked if we could add a letter. And so we added a letter. There are a few other letters that folks have asked for that we haven't added yet. As I said, we'll do a number of those this summer. But those were just a few of the items, I'd say, that came out of the focus groups with ATD members.
Thank you, Abigail. We have some financial aid officers, faculty, higher education administrators, and others on our webinar today, but we also have a student who wants to know, should I describe how much help I need exactly in my appeal?
I think it's always helpful to be specific, but again, that's something where, as you'll see as you go through the letter, you should share a summary of your situation and then try to get in contact with your financial aid office as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And we talked about SwiftStudent being a free demo. There was one question about, is there any level to the service that requires a cost?
Nope, there's nothing. It's completely free. There's really no catch. We're a philanthropic foundation. We make grants. And so we wanted to make sure that this was available really free to the school, free to everybody, but especially thinking about the schools that needed it most and the students who needed it most. It was important that this be freely available. So, we're going to continue to provide upkeep for this on a content side, and FormSwift will continue to maintain it technically. They have a flourishing business that helps people customize other kinds of legal forms like wills and automobile bills of sale. And so, keeping this part of the site updated is really de minimis to them.
Thank you, Abigail. I think we've covered the questions in our chat and in our Q&A, and I know we have some upcoming slides that talk about next steps for providing feedback. We want to thank you for joining us today, and we welcome you to send any additional questions or comments via email or Twitter to swiftstudents@shs.org, or you can tag us at #SwiftStudents. You can also reach Achieving the Dream at atdwebinars@achievingthedream.org, or tag us at #ATD_network. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar.